You're barren, and my son deserves better than a defective wife." The words hung in the air of the Osborne family estate like a death sentence, and Natalia Osborne felt her entire world collapse into those 9 syllables. Her mother-in-law Margaret stood before her, immaculate in pearls and judgment, holding medical files like weapons. Behind her, Natalia's husband Derek stared at the floor, his silence louder than any confession. "It was her 30th birthday. 2 years of trying," Margaret continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "The doctors confirmed it. Your fallopian tubes are destroyed. You can't give Derek children. You can't give this family an heir, so we're doing what's necessary." She snapped her fingers and Derek's sister appeared with a packed duffel bag. "You need to leave. Tonight." "Derek?" Natalia's voice cracked, desperate for him to defend her, to choose her, to remember the vows he'd made. But her husband wouldn't meet her eyes. He stood frozen behind his mother's chair, hands shoved in his pockets, jaw clenched. The man who'd promised to love her in sickness and health was choosing his family's cruelty over his wife's heart. "I'm sorry," he finally whispered, but the front door was already opening. Cold air rushed in like an execution notice. They threw her out into the snowstorm, literally threw her belongings after her, then locked the door. Someone tied the birthday balloons, the ones Natalia had brought herself, to her wrist, a grotesque mockery of celebration. The happy birthday sash across her emerald dress glittered in the porch light as she stumbled down the steps, and Natalia wondered if this was how it felt to be erased from existence. 3 hours later, she sat at a bus stop, hypothermia setting in, watching her breath crystallize. The last bus had passed without stopping. The balloons bobbed mockingly in the wind. She was freezing to death on her birthday, discarded like something broken that no one wanted to fix. That's when the blue truck stopped at the red light. The driver rolled down his window, a handsome black man with children sleeping in the back seat, and eyes that seemed to see straight through her shattered soul. His voice cut through the storm like a command. "Get in the car." Natalia should have refused. Should have asked who he was, where he was going, why a stranger would stop for a woman dying on a street corner. But she had nothing left. No home, no husband, no future. So when he said please, with the kind of understanding that only comes from surviving your own destruction, she climbed into his truck. She didn't know Jacob Smith was a CEO. Didn't know he was a widowed single father, desperate for help. Didn't know that her worst day was about to become the beginning of something that would save them both, or destroy everything he'd built to protect his children. Before we begin, click subscribe, like this video, and tell me in the comments where in the world you are watching from and what time is it over there. Your support helps us bring more wonderful stories, and trust me, you won't want to miss them. The warmth of Jacob's truck felt like violence against Natalia's frozen skin. She shook uncontrollably in the passenger seat, her teeth chattering so hard she couldn't speak. In the back seat, one of the children stirred, mumbling something about dinosaurs before falling silent again. Jacob drove with quiet efficiency, asking no questions, offering no pity. Just the hum of the engine and the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers clearing snow. 20 minutes later, they pulled through iron gates into a property that made Natalia's breath catch. The mansion sprawled across manicured grounds, all stone and glass and old money. Jacob parked in a circular driveway, killed the engine, then turned to face her. "Can you walk?" Natalia tried to nod, but her body wouldn't cooperate. Jacob came around, opened her door, and without asking permission, lifted her into his arms. She should have protested. She was a grown woman, a stranger. This was inappropriate. But she'd lost the capacity for dignity somewhere between being thrown out and accepting rides from men whose last names she barely knew. Inside, a middle-aged black woman with kind eyes and silver-streaked hair appeared in the foyer. "Lord have mercy, Mr. Smith. What happened?" "She was freezing to death at a bus stop, Gloria. Can you help her?" Jacob's voice was calm but firm. "Hot bath, warm clothes, soup. I'll get the kids to bed." Gloria ushered Natalia upstairs while Jacob disappeared with the sleeping children. The bathroom was larger than Natalia's old apartment, all marble and soft lighting. Gloria ran a bath, left thick towels and a sweatsuit, then retreated with instructions to take her time. Natalia sank into the water and finally let herself cry. Silent, shaking sobs for everything she'd lost in one terrible night. When she emerged 30 minutes later, dressed in clothes that smelled like lavender detergent, Gloria had soup waiting in a guest bedroom. "Eat," she commanded gently. "Then sleep. Mr. Smith says you can stay as long as you need." But Natalia barely heard her. Through the open door, she could see into the hallway where Jacob was carrying the smallest child, a little girl, maybe 3 years old, toward another bedroom. The child's eyes opened briefly, landing on Natalia with sleepy curiosity. "Daddy," the little girl mumbled. "Why is the sad birthday lady crying?" Jacob's eyes met Natalia's across the distance. Something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or shared understanding of what it meant to be broken in front of witnesses. "Because sometimes," Jacob said softly to his daughter, "grown-ups have very bad birthdays. But we're going to help make hers better. Okay, Zara?" "Okay, Daddy." Natalia watched them disappear down the hall, this stranger and his child, and felt something crack open in her chest. She didn't know who Jacob Smith was or why he'd stopped for her. But as she climbed into the guest bed and pulled the covers to her chin, one thought burned through her exhaustion. She couldn't stay here. She couldn't let these children, these innocent, motherless children she'd glimpsed sleeping in the truck, get attached to someone as broken as her. Tomorrow she'd leave. Tonight, she'd survive. But when morning came, Jacob Smith would make her an offer that would change everything. A job, a purpose, and 4 children who desperately needed someone to love them. And Natalia would have to decide if she was brave enough to let herself be needed again, or if being thrown away once was enough to teach her that some women weren't meant to be mothers at all. Morning light streamed through unfamiliar windows, and for 3 blissful seconds, Natalia forgot where she was. Then reality crashed back. The divorce, the humiliation, the stranger's mansion. She sat up too fast, her head spinning, and spotted her clothes from yesterday folded neatly on a chair. Someone had washed and dried them. The kindness made her want to cry again. She dressed quickly, determined to leave before Jacob woke. She'd imposed enough. But when she crept downstairs with her duffel bag, she found him in the kitchen, dressed in a charcoal suit, making coffee like a man who'd been awake for hours. "Running away?" he asked without turning around. "I shouldn't be here. Last night was, thank you, but I need to go." Jacob poured 2 cups, slid one across the marble island toward her. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Natalia sat, clutching her bag like a shield. "My nanny quit 3 days ago," Jacob said, his voice matter of fact. "Gave 2 weeks' notice, then walked out after an argument with my mother-in-law about bedtimes. My children need someone. You need employment and a place to stay. This is practical, not charity. You don't know anything about me. I know you were thrown out on your birthday for something that wasn't your fault. I know you're a kindergarten teacher. Gloria found your credentials in your bag while looking for emergency contacts." He paused, his dark eyes assessing. "And I know you didn't give up last night. You could have, but you got in the car. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." "I can't. I'm not qualified to raise someone else's children. You teach 5-year-olds for a living. You're overqualified." Jacob's expression softened slightly. "Look, my kids are struggling. Their mother died 3 years ago, and they've been through 4 nannies since then. They need stability, consistency, someone who won't leave the second things get difficult." The irony wasn't lost on Natalia. She'd just been abandoned for being defective. And now this man wanted to pay her to mother his children. Children she could never give him herself. "Why are you doing this?" she whispered. Jacob was quiet for a long moment. "Because 3 years ago I was drowning, and someone threw me a lifeline when they didn't have to. I'm returning the favor." Before Natalia could respond, chaos erupted from upstairs. Children's voices, footsteps thundering, then a crash followed by crying. Jacob closed his eyes briefly, his jaw tight with exhaustion that looked bone deep. "That's Marcus and Isaiah fighting over the bathroom again," he said. And Zara just knocked over the tower of blocks she's been building since Tuesday. Olivia will refuse breakfast unless it's shaped like a star, and I have a board meeting in 45 minutes that I cannot miss. He looked at Natalia with something close to desperation. 1 week. Trial period. Staff quarters, competitive salary, no expectations beyond keeping my children alive and reasonably happy. If it doesn't work, you leave with a month's pay and a reference. If it does work, he paused, then maybe we both get a second chance. Natalia knew she should refuse, should walk out that door and figure out her life without accepting handouts from strangers. But upstairs, a little girl was crying over broken blocks, and Natalia's kindergarten teacher instincts flared to life like muscle memory. 1 week, she heard herself say. Jacob's shoulders dropped with relief. Thank you. Gloria will show you the staff quarters. I'll be home by 6. He grabbed his briefcase, then stopped at the door. And Natalia? My children have been through hell. If you're going to leave eventually, leave now. They can't survive another abandonment. Then he was gone, and Natalia was left staring at 4 pairs of eyes peeking around the kitchen doorway. Marcus, tall and solemn with his father's sharp features, twins Olivia and Isaiah, mirror images with cautious expressions, and little Zara, still hiccuping from tears, clutching a stuffed elephant. Are you the sad birthday lady? Zara asked. Natalia forced a smile. I am, but I'm feeling much better now. Want to help me make breakfast shaped like stars? Within days, Natalia had restructured the entire household. Bedtimes became sacred rituals with stories and songs. Homework happened at the kitchen table with hot chocolate and patience. She taught Olivia to paint her feelings when words failed, helped Isaiah process his grief through building elaborate Lego cities, convinced Marcus that asking for help wasn't weakness, and gave Zara the constant physical affection she'd been starving for. The children bloomed under her attention like flowers finally given water. And Jacob watched from his home office, taking calls and reviewing contracts, but always aware of the woman who'd transformed his war zone into a home. He watched her teach Zara to tie her shoes with endless patience, watched her sit with Marcus during a panic attack about a math test, her hand on his back, her voice steady, watched her navigate his complicated, grieving children with an intuition that seemed almost supernatural. She fit. God help him. She fit into their broken constellation like she'd been designed specifically to fill the gaps his wife's death had left behind. And that terrified him more than anything, because in 3 weeks, Natalia Osborne had become essential. And Jacob Smith had learned the hard way that essential things could be taken away in an instant, leaving nothing but wreckage in their wake. What he didn't know yet was that his late wife's parents had been watching, waiting, and they'd just hired a private investigator to document exactly how quickly Jacob had replaced their daughter with the help. 3 months dissolved like sugar in water, sweet and imperceptible. Natalia had stopped thinking of herself as the nanny and started thinking in terms of we and our morning routine, our favorite park, our inside jokes. The Smith household transformed under her care, chaos giving way to laughter that hadn't echoed through these halls since Helen's death. She learned their languages. Marcus's anxiety manifested in perfectionism, so she taught him that B's weren't failures and that his father's love wasn't conditional on straight A's. Olivia painted her grief in violent purples and reds until Natalia showed her that yellow could exist alongside the darkness. Isaiah's silence scared the other nannies, but Natalia understood that some children processed loss without words, so she sat beside him during his Lego marathons, present but not pushy. And Zara, clingy Zara, who'd been called too much by previous caregivers, received the constant physical affection she'd been starving for. Late nights became sacred. After the children slept, Natalia and Jacob found themselves in the kitchen over tea, conversations stretching into confessions. He told her about the guilt that ate him alive, how he was supposed to drive that night 3 years ago, but Helen had insisted because he'd had wine at dinner. I watched her leave. I kissed her goodbye. 40 minutes later, the police were at my door. Natalia shared what she'd never told anyone, how the infertility diagnosis had felt like her body's betrayal, how she'd started viewing herself as fundamentally broken. Derek's mother said I was defective, and part of me believed her. "You're not defective," Jacob said quietly. "You're here, with my children, making them whole again." The air between them shifted, charged with something neither dared name. Then came the nightmare. Natalia woke to Zara's screams at 2 a.m., already running before consciousness fully returned. She burst into the little girl's room to find her sobbing, tangled in sheets, crying for mommy. But when Natalia reached for her, Zara threw herself into her arms, not toward the photograph of Helen on the nightstand. "Don't leave," Zara whimpered against Natalia's chest. "Please don't leave like mommy did." "I'm right here, baby. I'm not going anywhere." Natalia rocked her, humming the lullaby Zara loved, not noticing Jacob standing in the doorway. His expression was unreadable, something between gratitude and grief, between relief and terror. His youngest daughter had just chosen a replacement for his dead wife. And the woman holding her, the woman who'd become indispensable to all of them, was the same broken soul he'd found freezing to death 3 months ago. She wasn't supposed to matter this much. None of this was supposed to be real. But as Jacob watched Natalia soothe his daughter back to sleep, he realized with sickening clarity that he was falling in love with her. And that terrified him more than anything, because loving someone meant being vulnerable to loss again. What neither of them knew was that tomorrow, spring would arrive with Marcus's school play. And in that crowded auditorium, surrounded by other families, Jacob would make a choice that would blur every professional boundary they'd carefully maintained. A choice that would set in motion events neither could control, starting with a kiss that would be witnessed by the wrong people, and ending with a custody battle that would force them both to answer one impossible question: how much are you willing to lose for a love you never saw coming? Spring exploded across the estate in defiant bursts of color, as if nature itself was demanding they notice beauty again. Natalia felt it in her bones, the thawing, the awakening, the dangerous hope that maybe broken things could bloom again. The touches came first. Jacob's hand on her lower back as he reached past her for coffee, her fingers brushing his when she passed him Marcus's permission slip. Moments that lasted half a second too long, charged with electricity, neither acknowledged. Then the glances. Jacob watching her braid Olivia's hair, something raw in his expression. Natalia catching him staring during dinner, then both looking away like teenagers caught in sin. Marcus's school play was their undoing. He'd been terrified for weeks, convinced he'd forget his lines as the Cowardly Lion. But when the curtain rose, he was magnificent, and when he bowed, his eyes found Natalia and Jacob sitting together in the audience like parents, like a unit, like something more than employer and employee. They drove home in charged silence, the children chattering in the back seat, oblivious to the tension crackling between the adults. At home, the kids dispersed to their rooms, high on adrenaline and chocolate. Jacob and Natalia stood in the kitchen, the space between them feeling both vast and non-existent. "He was incredible," Natalia said softly. "You should be so proud." "We should be proud." Jacob stepped closer. "You're the reason he went on that stage. You're the reason any of them are okay again." "Jacob?" He kissed her, one hand cupping her face, the other sliding around her waist, pulling her close like he was drowning and she was air. Natalia melted into him for 3 perfect seconds before reality crashed back. They broke apart, both breathing hard, both terrified. "This can't happen," Jacob said, voice rough. "You work for me. My kids are vulnerable. If this goes wrong, if you leave..." He couldn't finish, couldn't voice the fear that loving her meant risking his children's hearts again. "I know," Natalia whispered, even though everything in her screamed to close the distance again. "We have to maintain boundaries." "Boundaries," Jacob repeated, but neither of them moved. The moment shattered when the front door opened. Jacob's mother, Diane Smith, walked in unannounced, as she often did, then stopped cold, taking in the scene with shrewd eyes. Her son and the nanny standing too close, faces flushed, guilt written across both of them. "Jacob," she said evenly, "we need to talk, privately. In Jacob's study, Diane didn't waste time on pleasantries. How long has this been going on? Nothing's going on. Don't insult my intelligence. Diane's expression was worried, not angry. I saw how you looked at her, how she looks at you, and I understand it, baby. She's brought life back to this house, but you need to know something. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Richard and Patricia have been asking questions. Helen's parents are watching you closely, Jacob. They've never forgiven you for surviving that accident. And now they're looking for evidence that you've moved on too quickly, that your judgment is impaired. Jacob's blood ran cold. They wouldn't. They want custody. Diane's voice was firm. They've wanted it since Helen died. The only reason they haven't pushed is because you've been the grieving widower, devoted father, living like a monk. But if they find out about Natalia, she shook her head, a woman you hired off the street who you're now sleeping with. We're not sleeping together, yet, but they won't care about technicalities. Diane gripped her son's shoulders. I like Natalia. She's exactly what this family needs. But if you pursue this, you need to be prepared for war, because Richard and Patricia will use her as ammunition to take your children, and they have the money and lawyers to make your life hell. After Diane left, Jacob stood at his study window, watching Natalia push Zara on the backyard swing, her laughter carrying on the spring breeze. He'd survived losing Helen, but losing his children would destroy him. The choice should have been simple. End whatever was developing with Natalia, protect his family, maintain the status quo. But as he watched her catch Zara at the bottom of the slide, both of them giggling like the world was safe again, Jacob realized the choice wasn't simple at all. Because his children didn't just need a father anymore, they needed her. And so did he. What he didn't know was that Richard and Patricia had already hired a private investigator. And tomorrow, that investigator would photograph Jacob and Natalia through the kitchen window at dawn, standing too close over coffee, his hand tucking hair behind her ear in a gesture so intimate it couldn't be explained away as professional. The war was coming, and the weapon they'd used to destroy him was the same woman who'd saved him. The Memorial Day barbecue was Diane's idea, a way to show Richard and Patricia that Jacob's household was stable, thriving, normal. But the moment Helen's parents arrived, tension crystallized in the spring air like an approaching storm. Richard Hayes was silver-haired authority in khakis and a polo, still devastatingly handsome at 65. Patricia was his perfect complement, elegant and cold, her smile never reaching her eyes. They'd barely spoken to Jacob since the funeral, their grief calcifying into blame he wore like a second skin. Grandma, Grandpa. The children swarmed them with obligatory hugs, but Natalia noticed how quickly they retreated back to her side. Zara actually hid behind her legs. The afternoon proceeded with uncomfortable civility. Richard made pointed comments about the yard needing work. Patricia inspected the children like products, noting Olivia's paint-stained shirt with visible disapproval. Natalia stayed in the background, trying to be invisible, just the help, nothing more. Then Isaiah fell off the swing. He hit the ground hard, knee split open, blood streaming. Before Jacob could move, all three other children screamed in unison, "Mom!" Natalia was already running. She scooped Isaiah up, her voice steady and calm despite his hysterical crying. "You're okay, baby, I've got you, let's get you cleaned up." She carried him toward the house, Marcus holding the door, Olivia and Zara flanking her like a protective guard. The word hung in the air behind them like a grenade with the pin pulled. "Mom?" Not Natalia, not Miss Osborne. "Mom." Jacob turned slowly to face his in-laws. Patricia's face had gone white, then red. Richard's expression was pure fury. "What?" Richard said, his voice dangerously quiet. "Did they just call her?" "Richard, your children just called the help, Mom." He stepped closer, invading Jacob's space. "The woman you hired off the street 4 months ago, the woman who's replaced my daughter in my grandchildren's lives." His voice rose. "You're replacing Helen with the nanny? A woman who can't even have children of her own? What kind of father are you?" The words hit Jacob like physical blows, but before he could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. "The kind who didn't abandon us." Marcus stood in the doorway, Isaiah's blood on his shirt, his young face older than his 9 years. You want to know what kind of father he is? He's the kind who stayed, who didn't disappear after Mom died like you did. Marcus, Jacob started, but his son wasn't finished. You said cards on our birthdays, came to visit twice a year, but when Zara cried every night for a year, when Isaiah stopped talking for 6 months, when I had panic attacks so bad I couldn't breathe. Marcus's voice cracked. Natalia was there, not you. She chose to stay. She chose to love us when she didn't have to. She's the help, Patricia hissed. It's her job. Real moms are the ones who stay, Marcus interrupted, tears streaming now. That's what you taught me about Mom, Grandpa. You said she was a real mom because she loved us even when things were hard. Well, Natalia does that too. And you left us. After Mom died, you left us alone. The silence was deafening. Richard's face contorted with rage and grief. We're taking them, he said to Jacob, his voice cold as death. We're filing for custody. You've clearly lost your mind, carrying on with an employee, letting your children forget their mother, destroying everything Helen built. He pulled out his phone, fingers already typing. Our lawyer will be in touch, and when we're done, those children will be raised by people who actually honor their daughter's memory. Patricia grabbed her purse, already heading for the car. You should have died in that accident, not her, she spat at Jacob. At least Helen would have kept this family intact. They left like a storm, violent and devastating. Jacob stood frozen in the wreckage, Diane gripping his arm, Marcus sobbing against his chest. Inside, through the window, he could see Natalia bandaging Isaiah's knee, Olivia and Zara pressed against her sides, all of them looking toward the commotion with fear in their eyes. Natalia appeared in the doorway, her face pale. Jacob, I'm so sorry. I'll resign. Tonight, this is my fault. No. Jacob's voice was raw. You're not going anywhere. But the children called me. They shouldn't have. I never tried to replace. You didn't replace anyone. Jacob looked at his son, then at Natalia, then at his mother. You gave them something to live for again. And if Richard and Patricia want to punish me for that, for choosing my children's happiness over their grief, then let them try. But as he said the words, Jacob felt the noose tightening. Because Richard Hayes didn't make empty threats, and custody battles were won by whoever could prove the other parent unfit. And what looked more unfit than a widower sleeping with the help he'd hired off a street corner? A woman whose own husband had thrown her away for being barren? The lawyers would arrive within 48 hours. The private investigators' photos would follow. And Jacob would have to make an impossible choice. Protect his children by sending away the woman they loved, or fight for all of them and risk losing everything. What he didn't know yet was that Natalia's ex-husband had been watching the news about the Hayes family custody dispute. And Derek Osborne, drowning in guilt and his own failing relationship, was about to arrive with a revelation that would turn everything Natalia believed about herself into a lie, and force her to choose between the vindication she'd always wanted and the love she never thought she deserved. The legal papers arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a process server who wouldn't meet Jacob's eyes. Emergency petition for custody. 47 pages documenting every way Jacob Smith had failed as a father since Helen's death. The accusations were surgical in their cruelty. Respondent has entered into an inappropriate relationship with domestic employee Natalia Osborne, a woman of questionable background who respondent hired without proper vetting after finding her on a street corner. Miss Osborne is infertile and was recently divorced by her husband for this deficiency. Yet respondent has allowed his minor children to form inappropriate attachments to her, calling her mom, in a clear attempt to replace their deceased mother. Respondent's judgment is severely impaired, and the children require stable, mature parental figures, namely, their maternal grandparents. Jacob read it 3 times, each word a nail in his coffin. They had photographs, him and Natalia in the kitchen at dawn, his hand in her hair, her carrying Zara to bed. The 2 of them on the back porch, sitting too close, talking too intimately for employer and employee. His attorney, Margaret Chen, was blunt. They're painting you as a grieving widower who lost perspective, and her as an opportunist who seduced her way into your home and your children's affections. She tapped the papers. The infertility angle is particularly damaging. They're arguing she's using your kids as surrogates for the children she can't have. That's not. Natalia would never. I believe you. But a judge will see a woman hired under unusual circumstances who's now calling herself mom, and they'll wonder about your judgment. Margaret leaned forward. Jacob, I need you to be honest. Are you in a relationship with Miss Osborne? No. But you want to be. The silence was answer enough. Margaret sighed. Then here's my advice. Put distance between you and her until this is resolved. Send her on paid leave. It'll show the court you're taking the accusation seriously and prioritizing your children's welfare over personal desires. Jacob felt like he was drowning. She hasn't done anything wrong. I know, but this isn't about right and wrong. It's about winning. That night, Jacob found Natalia in the kitchen after the children slept. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged. She'd seen the papers. Gloria had told her everything. You need to take a leave of absence, Jacob said, the words tasting like ash. Paid, full benefits, until the custody case is resolved. It's the only way to show the court that I'm the problem. Natalia's voice was hollow. That you're fixing your mistake. That's not what I meant. Yes, it is. She stood, wrapping her arms around herself. They're right, aren't they? I'm just the broken woman you pip off the street, and now I'm destroying your family. Natalia, I'll pack tonight. Her voice cracked. I should have left months ago, before the kids got attached, before I got. She stopped, unable to finish. Before I fell in love with all of you. Jacob wanted to grab her, to kiss her, to tell her she was wrong about everything, but his attorney's words echoed. This isn't about right and wrong. It's about winning. I'm sorry, he whispered. Natalia nodded, tears streaming silently. Me too. By morning, her bags were packed. But when she tried to say goodbye, the children's world imploded. Marcus locked himself in his room. Olivia painted violent black slashes across her canvas, screaming that everyone always left. Isaiah built a wall of Legos between himself and the world. His silence returned like an old friend. And Zara wrapped herself around Natalia's legs and wouldn't let go, sobbing so hard she made herself sick. Please don't leave, Zara begged. Please, Mommy, please don't leave like Mommy did. The word shattered something in Jacob. He watched his children fracture in real time, watched 4 fragile souls who'd finally started healing break open again. And he realized with crushing clarity, sending Natalia away wouldn't protect them. It would destroy them. That night, after Natalia had coaxed the children to sleep through promises she wasn't sure she could keep, Zara crawled into Jacob's lap in his study. She was supposed to be asleep, but her eyes were wide and devastated. If Natalia leaves, she whispered, you're choosing them again. Choosing who, baby? Everyone except us. Zara's little hand patted his cheek. After Mommy died, you chose work. Then you chose Grandma and Grandpa's feelings. Now you're choosing them again. But you never choose us. The words hit Jacob like a freight train. His 3-year-old daughter had just diagnosed the central failure of his life. He'd been so busy protecting his children from more pain that he'd forgotten to fight for their joy. You're right, he said, his voice breaking. But not anymore. I'm choosing you. All of you. Including Natalia. Promise? Promise. Jacob found Natalia in the guest room, her bag still packed. Unpack, he said. Jacob, I can't. Unpack. We're fighting this together. He stepped closer, his resolve hardening. Richard and Patricia want to punish me for moving on. Fine, let them try. But I'm not sacrificing your place in this family to appease their grief. You're staying. The court can see the truth. My children are thriving because of you. And if Richard and Patricia want to argue that love and stability are somehow damaging, then we'll prove them wrong. Natalia searched his face. This could cost you everything. You are everything, Jacob said quietly. You and those 4 kids, everything else is just noise. But as they stood in that guest room, neither knowing whether to close the distance or maintain the careful space between them, Jacob's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. A photo attachment. He opened it. His blood turned to ice. The photo showed a man, mid-30s, handsome, expensive suit, standing on Jacob's front porch. The message below read, "Derek Osborne is outside your house. Thought you should know your nanny's ex-husband is looking for her. He says he has information that will change everything about her infertility diagnosis. Might want to hear him out before you go to war for a woman built on lies." A friend, Jacob, looked at Natalia, whose face had gone white. She'd seen the message. "That's Derek," she whispered. "What does he want?" Downstairs, the doorbell rang, and Jacob realized that the custody battle might be the least of their problems, because whatever Derek Osborne had come to say was about to detonate like a bomb, forcing Natalia to choose between the vindication she'd craved for months and the family she'd built from ruins. Derek Osborne looked exactly the same. Sandy hair, perfectly styled, expensive watch catching the porch light, that apologetic smile that once made Natalia's heart flutter. Now it just made her nauseous. "Hello, Natalia," he said softly, like they were old friends catching up, not ex-spouses whose marriage ended with her freezing on a street corner. "Can we talk?" Jacob stood behind her, a solid wall of protection. "She doesn't owe you anything." "I know." Derek's eyes never left Natalia's face. "But I owe her everything, and I need to tell her the truth." They sat in Jacob's study, neutral territory. Derek refused coffee, his hands shaking as he pulled out medical documents. The silence stretched like wire, ready to snap. "Amanda's pregnant," Derek finally said. "My girlfriend. We found out 2 months ago, and I was happy, relieved even. Proof that you were the problem, you know?" He laughed bitterly. "Except Amanda started having complications. The doctors ran tests, genetic screening, and they found..." His voice cracked. "I'm the one who's infertile, Natalia. Severely low sperm count, genetic abnormalities. The pregnancy is a miracle, 1 in a million odds. But it means," he looked up, tears streaming, "it means you were never broken. My family blamed you. I let them throw you out. And you were innocent the entire time." The words hit Natalia like a physical blow. Not broken, never broken. 2 years of shame, of believing she was defective, of internalizing her mother-in-law's cruelty, all based on a lie. "Why are you telling me this?" Her voice was barely audible. "Because I want you back." Derek leaned forward, desperate. "I know I don't deserve it. I know I stood there like a coward while my mother destroyed you. But I'm different now. Amanda, she's not you. She doesn't understand me the way you did. And I can offer you everything you wanted. Public vindication, a formal apology from my family, financial compensation, and..." He pulled out another document. "A prenuptial agreement promising you'll be provided for, even if we can't conceive again. We can adopt. We get out." Natalia's voice was ice. "Natalia, please." "You threw me away." She stood, trembling with rage she'd suppressed for months. "Your family called me barren and worthless, and you said nothing. You watched them throw me into a snowstorm on my birthday, and you closed the door. And now you want me back because your new girlfriend made you feel guilty? I love you. You love the idea of not being the villain." Natalia's laugh was sharp and broken. "You want my forgiveness so you can sleep at night, so you can tell yourself you're a good man who made a mistake. But you're not. You're a coward who sacrificed his wife to keep his mother happy." Derek's face crumpled. "I know, and I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Just think about it. Think about what I'm offering. The life you always wanted, the vindication you deserve, the chance to prove everyone wrong. I don't need to prove anything to anyone." Natalia opened the study door. "Leave, and don't come back." But as Derek walked to his car, he turned back. "That man, Jacob Smith, he's in a custody battle, right? His in-laws are claiming he's unfit because of you?" He shook his head. "If you stay with him, you'll destroy his life. But if you come back to me, I'll testify on his behalf. I'll tell the court you're a good woman who was wronged. I'll help him keep his kids." He met her eyes. "Isn't that worth something?" Then he was gone, and Natalia stood in the doorway, shaking. The vindication she'd craved for months was finally hers. Derek's family would have to admit they were wrong. The world would know she wasn't defective. And she could save Jacob's custody case by removing herself from the equation. proving she wasn't the opportunistic homewrecker Richard and Patricia painted her as. All she had to do was go back to the man who'd abandoned her. She turned to find Jacob standing in the hallway, his expression devastated. He'd heard everything. "Are you going back to him?" Jacob asked quietly. "I don't know." Natalia wrapped her arms around herself. "He's offering me everything I wanted. Except love." Jacob stepped closer, his voice rough with emotion he could no longer contain. "He's offering you vindication and money and public apologies. But not love. Not real love that chooses you when it's hard, not just when it's convenient. Jacob, I'm in love with you." The words exploded out of him like he'd been holding them underwater, and they'd finally broken free. "I've been in love with you since you taught Zara to tie her shoes with more patience than I knew existed. Since you sat with Marcus during his panic attack and made him believe he was enough. Since you walked into my broken family and made us whole again without even trying." He closed the distance between them. "Derek can offer you closure. But I'm offering you a future, messy and complicated and terrifying, but real. Your children need you, love you, have already chosen you." Jacob's hands framed her face. "And so have I. So don't go back to a man who threw you away. Don't choose vindication over love. Choose me, choose us, choose the family you've built with your own hands from absolutely nothing." Natalia felt tears streaming down her face. Months of grief and shame and desperate hope finally cracking open. "I'm scared. So am I. But I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you." He kissed her then, not the desperate, stolen kiss from months ago, but something deeper. A promise. A choice. A declaration that some loves were worth burning the world down for. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Natalia whispered, "I'm staying. Thank God." But their relief was short-lived, because the next morning, Richard and Patricia's attorney would file an amended complaint, adding Derek's visit as evidence. Respondent's employee is simultaneously pursuing reconciliation with her ex-husband while engaging in inappropriate relations with respondent, demonstrating instability and poor judgment that renders her unfit to care for minor children. And the custody hearing, where everything would be decided, was now just 72 hours away. Natalia had chosen love over vindication. But the choice might have cost Jacob everything. And in a courtroom, with 4 children's futures hanging in the balance, they'd have to prove that a family built on love was stronger than one built on blood and obligation. The question was, would the judge agree? Or would choosing each other mean losing the children they both loved more than life itself? The courtroom felt like a tomb, all dark wood and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look half dead. Natalia sat behind Jacob's legal team, hands clasped so tight her knuckles were white. Across the aisle, Richard and Patricia sat like marble statues, their grief weaponized into righteous fury. Judge Monica Reeves was a black woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She reviewed the files with methodical precision while both legal teams prepared their ammunition. Patricia's attorney, Vincent Crawford, struck first. He was silver-haired elegance with a voice like poisoned honey. "Your Honor, this case is about a father who lost perspective after tragedy. Jacob Smith was a devoted husband and father until his wife's untimely death. But rather than grieve appropriately, he hired, off a street corner, literally, a woman of questionable character to replace his children's mother. He displayed the photographs like evidence at a murder trial. Jacob and Natalia in the kitchen at dawn, her tucking Zara into bed, the two of them on the porch, sitting close, talking intimately. Ms. Natalia Osborne was recently divorced because she's infertile. Her own husband's family discarded her as defective. Yet Mr. Smith allowed, even encouraged, his vulnerable children to call her mom within months. This isn't caregiving. It's psychological manipulation by a desperate woman using motherless children as surrogates for the family she can't have. Crawford paused for effect, and when confronted by the children's maternal grandparents, people who actually share their blood, their history, their mother's memory, Mr. Smith chose his employee over his children's stability. That's not love. That's obsession, and it's rendered him unfit. Natalia felt bile rise in her throat. Every insecurity she'd ever had was being dissected in public, twisted into evidence of her unworthiness. Margaret Chen stood, her petite frame radiating controlled fury. "Your Honor, what Mr. Crawford calls obsession, I call salvation. 8 months ago, Jacob Smith's children were drowning. Marcus was having panic attacks so severe he missed 30 days of school. Isaiah hadn't spoken in 6 months. Olivia's teacher reported self-harm through destructive art. And Zara." Margaret's voice softened. 3-year-old Zara was so terrified of abandonment she couldn't sleep alone. She presented a different set of documents, report cards showing dramatic improvement, therapist notes documenting breakthroughs, teacher testimonials praising the children's transformation. Miss Osborne didn't manipulate these children. She saved them. And the petitioners, the grandparents who claimed to care so deeply, visited twice in 3 years after their daughter's death. Twice. While Miss Osborne showed up every single day, not because she was paid to, but because she chose to love children who weren't hers by blood, but became hers through commitment. Judge Reeves raised a hand. "I'd like to hear from the children." Richard shot to his feet. "Your Honor, they're too young to understand." "Mr. Hayes, these children are old enough to know who makes them feel safe. I'll hear from them." Marcus entered first, wearing his best shirt, his hands shaking. At 9 years old, he looked impossibly small in the witness chair. "Marcus," Judge Reeves said gently, "can you tell me about Natalia?" The boy took a breath. "My mom died when I was 6, and for a long time I thought it was my fault, like maybe if I'd been better, she wouldn't have left. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I thought if I was perfect, nothing bad would happen again." Tears streamed down his face. "Natalia taught me that people don't leave because you're not perfect. They leave because life is hard and sometimes terrible things happen. But she also taught me that some people stay, not because they have to, but because they choose to. And that's better. That means more." "Do you want to live with your grandparents?" the judge asked. "No." Marcus's voice was firm. "They loved my mom, but they don't love us, not the way Natalia does." Olivia came next, paint still under her fingernails. "Natalia taught me that feelings can't kill you, that being angry or sad or scared is okay. My grandma says I should smile more, be grateful mom's in heaven, but Natalia lets me paint ugly things when I need to. She says my feelings are real and important." Isaiah, the silent twin, shocked everyone by speaking. "I didn't talk for a long time because words felt too heavy. Natalia never made me explain. She just sat with me while I built things. And one day I told her I missed my mom, and she said, 'Me too, me too.'" His voice cracked. "She misses someone she never met because we miss her. That's love." Finally, Zara. The judge had to lower the microphone. The little girl clutched her stuffed elephant, her voice small but determined. "I don't remember my first mommy very much, just that she smelled like flowers and sang off-key." Zara looked directly at Patricia. "Grandma says I should remember more, but I can't, and that makes her mad." She turned to the judge. "Natalia doesn't get mad that I can't remember. She says it's okay to love someone new, that my first mommy would want me to be happy. Is that bad?" "No, sweetheart," Judge Reeves said softly. "That's not bad at all." Then Jacob took the stand. Margaret asked the question that mattered. "Do you love Natalia Osborne?" The courtroom held its breath. "Yes," Jacob said, his voice clear. "I love her, and I know that terrifies people, that I moved on, that I let someone into my life who isn't Helen, but loving Natalia doesn't diminish what I had with my wife. Helen was," his voice broke, "everything to me. Losing her nearly destroyed me. But Natalia taught my children that joy is still possible after loss. That loving again isn't betrayal. And if this court believes that makes me unfit, then I'll accept that judgment. But I won't apologize for choosing life over grief." He looked at Richard and Patricia. "I know you blame me for Helen's death. I blame myself too. But our children need more than guilt and memory. They need someone who shows up, who fights for them, who loves them in the present tense. That's Natalia, and I'm not giving her up." Crawford stood for cross-examination. "Mr. Smith, you hired Ms. Osborne after finding her on a street corner. Did you perform a background check?" "No." Did you verify her employment history, check references, ensure she wasn't dangerous? I saw a woman freezing to death on her birthday, Jacob said evenly, and I chose not to let her die. If that's poor judgment, I'll wear it. And now you're sleeping with her. We haven't slept together. Jacob's voice was steel. But even if we had, that's between us and doesn't affect my ability to parent my children. Crawford smiled like a shark. But it does affect your judgment. You're choosing a relationship with an employee over your children's stability. I'm choosing all of them, Jacob interrupted. And there's nothing unstable about teaching my children that love is worth fighting for. The judge called a recess. In the hallway, Natalia found Jacob, pressed her forehead to his. Whatever happens, she started. We fight, Jacob finished. Together. But as Judge Reeves returned to her chambers to deliberate, both knew the next 24 hours would determine everything. A judge who'd never met them, who knew nothing of late-night tea conversations or how Zara's nightmares stopped after Natalia arrived, would decide if love built from rubble was enough. And in her chambers, Judge Monica Reeves stared at two files. One showing grief-stricken grandparents fighting for their daughter's memory, the other showing a father and a woman who'd built a family from broken pieces. The law said blood mattered. But 4 children had just testified that choice mattered more. Tomorrow, the judge would render her verdict. And Natalia and Jacob would learn if second chances at love were worth the war, or if sometimes the cost of choosing each other was losing everything else that mattered. Judge Reeves returned to the courtroom at 9 a.m. sharp, her expression unreadable. The gallery was packed. Diane Smith, Gloria, even some of the children's teachers who'd submitted testimonials. Marcus, Olivia, Isaiah, and Zara sat in the front row, hands linked like a chain that refused to break. I've reviewed the evidence extensively, Judge Reeves began, her voice measured. And I've considered the testimonies of 4 children who demonstrated remarkable clarity about their own needs. This court recognizes that Richard and Patricia Hayes are grieving parents who lost their daughter tragically. That grief is valid and deserves compassion. Natalia felt Jacob's hand find hers under the table. However, the judge continued, this case isn't about the grandparents' grief. It's about what serves the children's best interests, and the evidence is overwhelming. These children are thriving under their current care. Their academic performance has improved, their mental health has stabilized, their teachers report engagement and joy that was absent before Miss Osborne's arrival. She looked directly at Richard and Patricia. Blood relation doesn't guarantee good parenting, and loss doesn't entitle you to displace stability with your need for control. Mr. Smith has demonstrated sound judgment in prioritizing his children's well-being. Miss Osborne has demonstrated exceptional care for children who weren't her responsibility, but became her family through choice. Judge Reeves adjusted her glasses. The petition for custody is denied. Mr. Smith retains full legal and physical custody. Mr. and Mrs. Hayes are granted supervised visitation, 2 afternoons per month, with the requirement of family therapy to address their relationship with their grandchildren. Patricia's sob echoed through the courtroom. Richard sat frozen, his face carved from stone. Furthermore, the judge added, I want to address something. Miss Osborne's character was attacked in these proceedings for her infertility, as if her inability to bear biological children somehow rendered her unfit to nurture them. That argument is not only medically absurd, but morally reprehensible. Motherhood isn't defined by biology. It's defined by presence, sacrifice, and unconditional love. And by that measure, these children already have a mother. This court recognizes Miss Osborne's role in this family and encourages Mr. Smith to formalize that relationship through legal channels when appropriate. The gavel fell. It was over. Marcus launched himself at Jacob, sobbing with relief. The other children followed, all 4 wrapping around their father and Natalia in a tangle of limbs and tears. Across the aisle, Richard and Patricia stood, Patricia weeping into her husband's shoulder, Richard's eyes burning with barely contained rage. As they left, Richard stopped Jacob in the hallway. This isn't over, he said quietly. You've poisoned our grandchildren against their mother's memory, and one day they'll realize what you took from them. I didn't take anything, Jacob said evenly. I gave them permission to heal. That's not poison, that's love. Outside the courthouse, Derek was waiting. He approached Natalia with desperate eyes. I heard the verdict. I'm glad you won, but my offer still stands. Come back to me. We can start over. Do it right this time. No. Natalia's voice was gentle but final. You gave me something important, Derek. You proved I was never broken, and I'm grateful for that. But I don't need vindication anymore. I don't need to prove anything to your family or mine or anyone. I just need— She looked at Jacob and the children. Them. The family I chose and who chose me back. Derek nodded slowly, defeat written across his face. He's a lucky man. No, Natalia said. I'm the lucky one. 6 months later, autumn painted the estate in gold and crimson. Natalia had moved from the staff quarters into the primary suite. A transition that felt both terrifying and inevitable. The children had adjusted with remarkable ease, as if they'd been waiting for permission to acknowledge what everyone already knew. She was their mother in every way that mattered. On a Saturday morning, Jacob asked Natalia to meet him in his study. She found him at his desk, looking uncharacteristically nervous. I have something for you, he said, sliding a leather folder across the desk. It's not traditional and maybe it's not romantic, but it's real. Natalia opened the folder. Inside were adoption papers, legal documents that would make her the children's mother in the eyes of the law, not just their hearts. Her name already filled in, 4 signatures waiting: Marcus, Olivia, Isaiah, and Zara. I talked to them, Jacob said quietly. Asked if they wanted this. If they were ready for you to be their mom officially, permanently. Not just in practice, but in law. And they— His voice broke. They've been asking for months why you didn't have the same last name. Why the school still called you emergency contact instead of parent. They want this, Natalia. We all want this. Tears blurred her vision. Jacob, I know it's not a ring. I know it's not the proposal every woman dreams of, but— He stood, coming around the desk to kneel in front of her. Marry me. Marry us. Not because we need you to stay, but because we choose you. Every day. Forever. Say you'll be ours legally, officially. Say you'll let us be yours. Yes, Natalia whispered. Yes to all of it. The ceremony was small, just family and close friends in the backyard where everything had changed that Memorial Day. The children stood as witnesses, Marcus holding the rings, the twins holding flowers, Zara holding Natalia's hand like she'd never let go. When it came time to sign the adoption papers, all 4 children crowded around, their hands on hers as she wrote her name. Natalia Osborne Smith. Mother to Marcus, Olivia, Isaiah, and Zara. Not by biology, but by choice. As the sun set over the estate, Natalia watched her children play in the yard, while Jacob wrapped his arms around her from behind. Do you ever think about that night? He asked. The bus stop? Every day, Natalia admitted. I think about how I wanted to die, how I believed I was too broken to deserve love. And now? She turned in his arms, looking up at the man who'd stopped his car when he didn't have to. Now I understand that I was never broken. I was just waiting for the moment when my life would crack open and everything I thought I wanted would be replaced by everything I actually needed. And what did you need? Them, Natalia said, gesturing to the children. You. This, a family that chose me when I had nothing left to offer but my wounded heart. Jacob kissed her forehead. You offered everything. You just didn't know it yet. That night, after the children were asleep, Natalia stood in her bedroom, their bedroom, and looked at the adoption papers framed on the wall. 4 signatures in different handwriting. 4 children who'd lost their first mother but gained a second one through the cruelest and most beautiful accident of fate. Infertility hadn't made her broken. It had made her available. Available for a man driving home with 4 sleeping children. Available for a family drowning in grief. Available for a love she never could have imagined on that frozen street corner when her old life ended. Sometimes you don't find your purpose. Sometimes it finds you, freezing on a street corner on your birthday, abandoned and convinced you're worthless. And sometimes a stranger stops his car and says, "Get in," And everything you thought you knew about family and love and belonging gets rewritten in a single act of grace. Natalia Osborne had wanted to be a mother her entire life. And she became one, not through the biology that failed her, but through the choice that saved her. Through 4 children who needed her as desperately as she needed them. Through a man who saw her drowning and threw her a lifeline disguised as a job offer. Her 30th birthday had been the worst day of her life. It was also the first day of everything that mattered. And as she climbed into bed beside Jacob, his arm pulling her close, their children safe in rooms down the hall, Natalia finally understood the truth that had eluded her for so long. You don't have to give birth to someone to be their mother. You just have to show up, stay present, choose them every single day, and let them choose you back. That's not biology, that's family.